All right. Our next speaker is Texas State Director of American Atheists and a member of the Global Secular Council. He's an atheist vlogger and activist. His videos focus on biology with an emphasis in countering creationist claims and advocating rationalism in science education. If you've never seen his foundational falsehoods of creationism, I highly, highly recommend it. They're incredible videos. But without further ado, Aron Ra.
Thank you very much, and thank you for scheduling me to come after Jerry DeWitt.
Thank you for scheduling him to come after Jerry DeWitt.
Right, I'm going to see which way is this looking. Here we go. Yeah, I've been kind of busy lately and haven't been able to keep up with the news, so let's check the newspaper headlines from recent months regarding the inequity of religious freedom. Beginning with this one. Roy Moore's Twisted History. Islam and Buddhism don't have First Amendment protection, Chief Justice says. Alabama's Chief Justice Roy Moore gave a sermon for pastors in which he said that religion, as defined in the First Amendment, applies only to his own version of God the Creator, and that the Free Exercise Clause doesn't apply to other religions. He says they don't want to do that because that acknowledges the Creator God. And this one sentence is already wrong on multiple levels. If there was a Creator God, then anyone who believes in gods at all would already know that. Christianity wouldn't be one of many different religions, each with thousands of denominations. Yet 2/3 of the world either believe in a different concept of God, a different God altogether, or no God at all. But Justice Moore seems to be under the impression that about 1 billion Muslims or so are living a lie because they secretly believe in his God and just don't want to acknowledge it, as if only Justice Moore has sincerely held beliefs and not the overwhelming majority of the rest of the world. Expressing his ignorance even further, he goes on to say that Buddha didn't create us, Muhammad didn't create us, it was the God of the Holy Scriptures. Except, of course, that according to his own Holy Scriptures, Jesus didn't create us either. Now, I know some people in this room will probably want to argue that, Jesus was God and therefore created the world, but Jesus didn't actually say that himself. He certainly never said that he created the world. Jesus always described God as someone else, somewhere else. So in a sense, Jesus is on the same level as Buddha and Muhammad with respect to the Creator. I know some Buddhists worship Buddha as a god and others don't. The original Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was apparently an atheist, as he said whether gods exist or not is irrelevant. But Justice Moore is definitely wrong about the God of Islam, because that's a different version of God than the one he worships. This is God the Father, also known as Abba, also known as Allah in the Holy Scriptures, known as the Quran. Moore should also be aware of, I went the wrong way, how do we go? Here we go. Lord Krishna, a pre-Christian Christ figure who reportedly performed many miracles, including giving sight to the blind. But Krishna did something that the Jewish Christ never did. Krishna didn't say that he came from God the way Jesus did. Krishna said that all of the gods came from within him, and that he personally created the world. As a matter of fact, it says that he created the universe. And it says this in the Holy Scriptures known as the Bhagavad Gita. And that's part of the Mahabharata, a relatively recent collection of Hindu scriptures that are still older than most of the Old Testament. And there are Vedic scriptures that are older than anything in the Bible. And what many Christians don't realize is that Judaism is older than Christianity, and that Hinduism is the oldest religion in continuous practice. And there are about twice as many Hindus in the world today than there are Protestant Christians like Justice Moore. So there's a couple reasons he should acknowledge them. And according to Moore, the government and the Supreme Court should define religion as James Madison and George Mason did: the duties we owe to the Creator and the manner of discharging it. And of course, he's referring to this quote, which he apparently hasn't actually read. So we'll finish that. The religion, or that religion, and the duty to which we owe our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence. Of course, that means that it is not enforceable by law, right? So you can't legally make somebody believe something. You can't declare a religion and enforce it on other people. And therefore, all men have an equal, natural, and unalienable right to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience, and that no particular religious sect or society ought to be favored or established by law in preference to others. Justice Moore's own citation speaks against it, stating clearly that Christianity and the worship of the God of the biblical scriptures should not be favored or established by law in preference to any other religion. George Mason was consistent on this point. His draft of the Virginia Declaration of Rights includes one of the first state guarantees of free exercise. In 1776, George Mason also submitted a bill to the Virginia State Assembly ending support of the previously established Anglican Church, wherein he said, "It is contrary to the principles of reason and justice that any should be compelled to contribute to the maintenance of a church with which their consciences will not permit them to join, and from which they can derive no benefit." Contrary to reason and justice, what if you can't reason with Justice Moore? Yeah. You're having a hard time hearing me in the back. Okay. All right. That's not supposed to happen. How's this? I thought if Jerry could do it, I could do it, I guess. Okay. Justice Moore's citation of James Madison serves him no better. "Experience witnesseth that ecclesiastical establishments, instead of maintaining the purity and efficacy of religion, have had a contrary operation. During almost 15 centuries has the legal establishment of Christianity been on trial. What have been its fruits? More or less, in all places, pride and indolence in the clergy, ignorance and servility in the laity, in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution." And Justice Moore is demonstrating all of that again. What did you expect? He's in Alabama. Let's see if it's any better in Arkansas. "Arkansas town bans pagan temple after finding out it's not Christian." Now this guy, named Bert Dahl, lives in the town of Beebe, which I guess makes him a Beebe doll. But seriously, it's a little town, and he had opportunity to speak with the mayor about using a building behind his house. I think it was his garage. He wanted to use the building behind his house as a church. And the mayor reportedly had no problem with that. You can set up a church anywhere you like, as long as it's Christian. But of course, this turned out to be a pagan church in Arkansas. And once the mayor realized that, he sent a letter to the city code officer ordering a cease and desist against a church that hadn't actually opened yet. Further, the letter said that no conditional or special use permits may be issued, even though none had been requested, because the mayor had already said that wouldn't be a problem. But now things are different. The city attorney said that the zoning code prohibits places of worship and private nonprofits, but investigative journalists found that the zoning code actually allows both of these things, and they found other neighbors that were already operating similar churches, except, of course, that they were Christian. But the city said that Dahl would need a permit. So he asked for the paperwork to request that, and they said that there was no paperwork they could give him, but that if they did, he wouldn't get approved for it anyway. This is the way the story was reported both in video and in text. So he turned to the alderman, who offered no assistance and gave journalists only one excuse as to explain why. They said that Dahl was denied because, quote, "that man's God isn't my God." this document? Apparently, it seems that Congress has one version of the First Amendment, which was amended again for Arkansas. And was amended again for Missouri. And speaking of Missouri, there were 2 police officers in the Ferguson area suspended for public statements of hateful threats, including murder. One of them said that protesters should have been put down on the first day like rabid dogs. Another one confessed to being, or admitted to being, a killer. He said that he has killed a lot. And he warned his audience not to get in his way because he'll kill a lot more. He described himself as a devout Christian and then expressed his bigotry against women, against Muslims, and against homosexuals. And he described Supreme Court justices as perverted sodomites. He also said that the Bible was the foundation of the Constitution and that he could straighten out the Supreme Court about that. And I say, no, he can't, because it wasn't, and I could straighten him out about that. But what more can you expect from a state where this happens? Missouri schools may have to alert parents when evolution is taught. Now, this bill would allow and encourage parents to take their children out of school for what would implicitly be approved absences in order to protect them from being exposed to forbidden knowledge. It's like that line out of Futurama. I don't understand evolution and I need to protect my kids from understanding it. Now, of course, this bill was sponsored by a Republican. No surprises there. Recent polls indicate that less than half of Republicans accept reality. Whether it's evolution, climate change, or the germ theory of disease. State Representative Rick Bratton said that teaching standards that were approved by the National Science Teachers Association count as indoctrination because they mandate that they teach only one side. And I so wish that I could address people like this to say that given the history and diversity of life on Earth, there is only one side. Evolution is an inescapable fact of population genetics. Intelligent design was disputed by science and refuted in a court of law. It is creationism, a form of religious extremism, a denial of reality dedicated to legendary fables that are literally fairy tales by definition. Evolution is real. I would love an opportunity to prove that in a public debate with any creationist politician stupid enough to accept my challenge, but of course, you know, none of them will. Bratton also said that requiring schools to teach evolution is an absolute infringement on people's beliefs. Because, as I pointed out so many times before, that among religious extremists, truth is irrelevant. Whether you believe matters more than whether it is true. And all claims of religion fall into one of 2 categories. Not evidently true, and evidently not true. And those are your only 2 choices there. And Mr. Bratton admits that what he believes is not evidently true, and he knows it's not. Because he also said that what's being taught is just as much faith and, you know, just as much pulled out of the air as, say, any religion. If we have one advantage over the religious ideologues, other than the fact that we can prove that we're right, it is that they are so dumb, they don't know how dumb they are. And I want to point out once again that evolution is a matter of verifiable fact, requiring absolutely no faith whatsoever, because it is indicated exclusively, exhaustively, and unanimously by all the available evidence from every relevant field of study and is contested by nothing. But this isn't about what Rick Bratton doesn't know about science. It's about what he does know about religion. Because this creationist just admitted that any religion, including his own, was pulled out of the air. And if you're not familiar with that, it is an American colloquialism referring to something that was made up, imagined out of nothing, fabricated, a tall tale with no basis in actual fact, but asserted as though it were true. In other words, a lie. I can only assume that he understands what he said and what it means, in which case this is quite an admission for someone intent on defending the faith and denying a proper, actual, factual education to other people's children. And this is what we can expect from the policies of the religious right. Ignorance, deception, misleading children, and defrauding little old ladies in an attempt to preserve a preferred belief, even when they accidentally, occasionally, absent-mindedly admit that they know it's not really true. This is why I say that religion is a matter of make-believe. And this story was from back in February. The bill passed initial hearings, but has since died, so at least we don't have to try Kitzmiller versus Dover all over again. Or will we? Because this story is from a month ago, although it began in February. And at that time, Republican Mike Fair said it was wrong to teach natural selection as fact. Here's another elected official who needs an education before he can legislate it. And I like that this is the way that the article reads in Forbes. There we go. Ignorant barely begins to describe this statement. Mike Fair clearly doesn't have the faintest grasp of biology or genetics. He's the last person that anyone should want to weigh in on science standards. His behavior goes far beyond mere ignorance, though. Not only is he wrong, but he wants to use the power of the state to impose his religious views under the guise of science on every student in South Carolina's schools. Now, admittedly, someone who moved out of South Carolina because he felt ostracized by that community. But it means that we would have to cite Kitzmiller versus Dover again, and we would have to cite Edwards versus Aguilar too. That's when a Louisiana law tried to impose biblical creationism. The U.S. Supreme Court sided on the side of 72 Nobel Prize-winning scientists, 17 state academies of science, and 7 other scientific organizations that evolution is a matter of fact and that creationism ain't nothing but blind faith. Despite all of this, Louisiana still managed to pass a bill allowing public school teachers to use pseudoscience supplements to promote creationism and denigrate every aspect of actual science that the religious right doesn't want to acknowledge. No amount of proof will ever change their minds. For a good example of this, Louisiana State Governor Bobby Jindal defended teaching creationism as being the best science possible. He then said that we should teach the kids both sides and then let them decide, what are we afraid of? Okay, let's teach the kids both sides, the truth and the lie. Except that we'll have professional educators convince the kids that the truth is only a theory, and a compilation of already falsified fables with no truth in it is the absolute truth from an unquestionable authority. Then we'll let the kids decide once we've deceived them and deprived them of the ability to make an informed decision. Well, why stop there? Let's teach them that the Holocaust never happened, that the moon landing was staged, that 9/11 was an inside job, and that the president is a foreign-born Islamic socialist. Why stop there? Let's teach the kids about Bigfoot and our military cover-up of UFOs and the reptiles from the Sirius star system who invaded our government from Area 51 and are now in control of the Illuminati. Why stop there? Let's teach them that the earth is hollow with a prehistoric world inside it, that the moon is made of green cheese, that Columbus discovered Ohio in 1942, and that Benjamin Franklin was the first king of America. Now, I would have thought that these last 2 examples were too extreme to consider, but I've actually had libertarian atheists tell me that if parents are paying for their kids' education, and that's what they want their kids to learn, then that's what they should be taught. And whether any of that is true or not doesn't matter at all. Now, I would have thought that we should be teaching kids actual information. And, well, I'll get to that in a moment. This is why we homeschool, isn't it? Which brings me back. Let's see. Try it. It's not working. My battery's gone out, I think. Yeah, this is not working. Is it off? It's off. How do you get this thing on? Does the battery need to be replaced? It's off.
Praying for you, Aron.
Yeah. If this is the best that God's got, then he's got a problem.
Hey, Robin. Clicker's not working.
That part's working. Okay. Alright, so I can raise my hand when we do this? It's a miracle. There we go, back to Texas. Okay, Texas court, thank you. Texas court rules against homeschoolers who expected rapture and stopped teaching their kids. Well, at least there's some good news. This story goes on to explain that the kids' education stopped in 2004. That's 10 years ago. Any child old enough to go to school then is old enough to work now. But they can't, because their parents cheated them by keeping them stupid. And it says here that one of the daughters ran away from home in order to go to school. How backward is that? This is one of many reasons why I say that religion reverses everything. Truancy charges were filed in 2007, and the parents saw fit to fight a 7-year legal battle while they refused to teach their kids reading, writing, arithmetic in the interim. They refused to teach their kids, seemingly as a matter of principle. And have you ever noticed that whenever parents are so bad at parenting that they end up on the news for it, it's almost always for religious reasons? And this story reports that the children were never seen doing any homework or reading. They were only singing and playing songs, waiting for the end of time. And I've known people like this. I knew a family that had 7 kids when I was a child. They had 7 kids, and they refused to mow the lawn or fix that hole in the wall because Jesus was coming back too soon for that to matter. And that was 50 years ago. According to this story, the battle is over whether parents have an absolute right to educate their kids or not, completely free of any state supervision, regulation, or requirements. And it seems to be all about the rights of deeply religious parents, as if their children have no rights of their own. Do children in this country have a right to be educated? Do they have a right to be taught things that are actually true, instead of being deceived to believe a bunch of hogwash that can be immediately disproved by any panel of scientists or historians? Given these examples, it occurs to me that parents are often the worst authorities about what should be taught in school, especially if they don't have any background in education themselves and no expertise in the matters they profess. And as I mentioned before, I would think that we owe it to our kids that they be taught mainstream information first, things we can actually show to be true, and then allow their parents to interject their ignorant opinions afterward. But as we've seen with every example so far, it isn't just parental authority misleading children. It's also parents being misled by every higher authority. And does that only happen in the South? No, but it seems to. Just look at, oh, South Carolina. No, that's South Carolina. We went backwards. South Dakota. Okay, I gotta figure out which button does what. Okay, so there they have a law requiring doctors to lie to their patients. Warning of increased risk of depression, psychological distress, and suicide in cases of abortion. And these statistics were never indicated, but the doctors are legally required to report them as if they had been. This article cites an American Psychological Association who reportedly said that the vast preponderance of medical and academic research published to date indicates that among adult women who have an unplanned pregnancy, the relative risk of mental health problems is no greater if they have a single elective first trimester abortion than if they deliver the pregnancy. However, this article also says that the new law does not privilege fact over fantasy. And there's an old saying that anyone who respects the law or fine sausage should not witness either being made. This ruling was based on a study whose results could not be confirmed because they included calculation errors that were discovered in peer review. They also included instances where depression had already been diagnosed before the abortion, as if it had been caused by the abortion. It implies other situations where conditions that occurred years later and were apparently unrelated. Yet, once again, facts be damned where the agenda of the religious right is concerned. In the fashion we've come to expect of religious fundamentalists, the burden of proof has been reversed such that they don't have to verify that their citations are correct. Instead, critics of this law would have to prove that abortion was never a significant causal factor in suicides. In other words, the ideologues can say whatever they want without any support at all, but you can't argue against that unless you can prove a negative and do it with scientific certainty. Is this the way that our legal system of government is supposed to work? Is this the way science works? No. Baseless assertions of ignorant opinions and demonstrably false fabrications of deliberately deceptive misinformation is the way religion works. And whenever we discuss abortion, it is appropriate to consider instances of rape, and this is a choice example of that. Woman seeks abortion after being raped at gunpoint by her father-in-law. And what are your chances of getting an abortion when you live in an area where you have to abide by Sharia law? But just as it says here, Islamic clerics ordered that she must live with her father-in-law, the rapist, as his wife, and that henceforth she must treat her actual husband as if he were her son, because her unborn child will be his half-brother. It would be funny if it weren't real. And notice here that the local clerics readily assume that the father-in-law really did repeatedly rape this woman at gunpoint and that he impregnated her. They don't question the charges. They assume that he's guilty and that he'll be found guilty. But that they're not concerned about what he did to her, nor what he would continue to do. Nor do they imagine that he's going to be convicted of any crime or that she'll get the abortion that she's asking for. She will obviously get no justice at all, and will even be criminalized if she doesn't surrender her own rights, forsake her real marriage, and submit to a violently abusive, potentially homicidal rapist for the rest of her life. This is the kind of insanity we can expect of any theocracy. And when I describe laws and policies as insane, understand that I don't consider religion to be a mental disorder. I'd only call it insane because it is irresponsible, irrational, unreasonable, reactive, and psychotic. And this is why we need a more secular society, because this is what you see whenever you look at countries where religion rules over law. And for a great example of that, let's look at Afghanistan. Struggling to keep an Afghan girl safe after mullah is accused of rape. So a mullah is the Islamic equivalent of a vicar or high priest. And this guy was accused of raping a girl in the mosque after a Quran recitation classes. He was arrested and he confessed to having sex with the girl, but in his defense, he said it wasn't rape. We needn't be concerned about how inappropriate his advances were, as he assures us that she responded and that it was consensual. And his accusers say that she wasn't yet of legal age to give consent, but he said that he took her for 17 and thus old enough in that part of the world. However, her parents and the medical examiners confirmed that she was only 10, that she weighed only 40 pounds, and that she hadn't developed any secondary sexual characteristics, and that the rape had been so violent that it caused a rupture between the vagina and the rectum, such that she bled so profusely that she nearly bled to death while awaiting emergency medical care. Yet he thought it was that she was 17 and consented. I'm sure I believe that. And if that's not outrageous enough, it gets worse. Because this is one of those backward places where it is the girl's fault if she gets raped. And the family wants to conduct an honor killing, to murder their own daughter, because she dishonored them by being the innocent victim of a sickening criminal whom they entrusted to look after her. And if you want it to get even worse, and it still does, the only option to killing the girl is that the mullah who offered, hold on a second. That mullah offered to marry his prepubescent victim as if that would solve the problem. And he's able to make this offer because he's free. He's not worrying about conviction either. Because the woman who brought the charges was the director of the women's center where the child was being taken care of. She got so many death threats from other mullahs that she resigned, fled town, and went into hiding. Then the police raided the clinic where the girl was being treated and turned her over to her parents, who in front of witnesses told the girl they were going to kill her in an honor killing once they got her home. And isn't it disturbing that no one is surprised to hear this kind of stuff anymore? And whether we're talking about Christian or Islamic fundamentalists, it doesn't really make any difference, does it? I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody about the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria and how all minority opinions with regard to religion have been given the ultimatum to submit or else convert to Islam or be executed. And all the horrors we hear typically associated with that sort of theocratic tyranny. We hear the same thing from Duck Dynasty, from John Hagee, from Pat Robertson, and from any number of fundamentalist Christians. This is what happens whenever religion gets its way. They're always polite and seemingly harmless until they get the upper hand. And then once any religion rules, the result has historically always been an automatic violation of human rights. Christianity has already been there and done that, and that offers our one ray of hope. Because with any oppressive dominion, such as Islam is and Christianity was, there are people, real human beings, who tend to be smarter than the herd mentality who were being manipulated by inflammatory propaganda. The reason that Christianity did not remain the oppressive entity that it was in the Dark Ages was because humanity is, on the whole, more moral and more compassionate than whatever sickening ideology is in command. This is especially true when the standard of living rises and the population is educated, because then the ratio is that the more outrageous the lunatic fringe, the more mainstream the objection. As we speak, Muslims around the world are condemning the atrocities of ISIS and other similarly violent groups. Likewise, some Christians are opposing their fascist factions on the right wing and are either adopting a more tolerant or more moderate tolerance, or they are abandoning the faith altogether. What America's religious right needs to understand is that here and around the world, Christianity is in a general state of decline, while Islam is growing. It's the fastest growing religion, and will soon be the dominant one. And by soon, I mean we're likely to see that happen. And whatever laws the Christians make today to accommodate their own faith will only pave the way for Islam to seize power over them tomorrow. And another thing that Christian and Muslim mainstream needs to understand is that you can't fight religion with religion, but you can fight it with reason. And atheism is growing too. We're the fastest growing demographic with regard to religion. And it would seem that Islam and atheism are in a race to either save or enslave the United States once Christianity loses its political influence. We advocate secular governments because that is the only way everyone can have the freedom to think or believe according to their own conscience. And with that, I have to circle back to Alabama's Justice Roy Moore. This is the same guy who in 2003 had a federal court judge order him to remove a 2.5-ton monument to the Ten Commandments from his courthouse. He had to have a superior court judge tell him how unconstitutional that was, and he still doesn't get it. He thinks those 10 Commandments are the foundation of American government. I wish I could get him to watch the presentation that I gave here at this campus a few months ago, wherein I proved that America was definitely not founded on any of the damn commandments. But it's sad when the facts don't matter to a judge. And it is appropriate that this image is in black and white. Simple people want uncompromising leaders who believe in extreme black or white dichotomies, who stand firm in their convictions or firm in their beliefs and hold to their convictions. And they better hope that they don't get what they prayed for, because they don't realize they're asking to be ruled by unreasonable people. Because you can't reason with somebody who is firm in their beliefs. Regardless what you plead, he's going to stand by whatever conviction he already had. So if you voted for that person for that reason, then you were asking to be judged according to prejudicial bias and without due consideration. And rather than being limited to black or white thinking, most people realize that almost no one is that extreme either way. More thoughtful people would measure somebody's situation according to a bell curve of gradient grays. And in the world of artists, this is appropriately known as a scale of values. And one of the advantages of wisdom, which is actually seen as a flaw among our elected leaders, is the ability to recognize multiple options and consider extenuating circumstances. But this perspective is not black or white or gray. It's analogous to a spectrum of color. And if we don't have the foresight to elect people of vision, or if we can't see what needs correction, then it will continue to be the blind leading the blind. Which brings me back to Texas, Governor Rick Perry. I can't tell you how happy I am that this man will not be our governor anymore. Everything I've ever heard, everything I've ever read or heard from this man seemed like a deliberate attempt to destroy the environment, the economy, and the middle class by deregulating industry, undermining education, and subverting every program of benefit to the women or the poor. He's also executed hundreds more prisoners than any other governor in American history, and he's done all he could to promote his own religion in public schools. For example, last year, a Texas legislator proposed the Merry Christmas Bill. This would have had teachers promoting their own religious beliefs, their personal religious beliefs, to their classrooms during the holidays. Now, this would have marginalized non-Christian kids even more than they were before, but more importantly, this would also force some teachers to reveal what should be privately held beliefs not to be scrutinized by parents, pupils, or the PTA, or principals for that matter. Because teachers with a minority opinion regarding religion can be outed by students or faculty, and as we've seen from personal experience and a few things we can cite in the news, if you don't believe what your administrators do, that could put your job at risk. And if you Google this bill today, you'll see that mine is the only voice of opposition quoted in the newspapers when I said that you can't have freedom of religion without having freedom from religion. So of course I took it personally when Rick Perry signed this bill into law, of course, because he looked into the cameras and said, Freedom of religion is not freedom from religion. Yes, I think he was directing that comment at me. According to dominionists like Perry and others like him, Americans have no right to freedom from religion. Whatever religion is dominant at the moment will be imposed despite all objections. And that means that the next dominant religion will be too. And it's hard to imagine how things will change in the future if you don't believe that there is a future, because you're living so near the end of the world. And it's an important thing to remember when you think about what your elected leaders believe and how that will inform their actions. Because although Perry won't be our governor anymore, look at the guy who's expected to succeed him. This guy is funded by the Koch brothers, and his multi-million-dollar campaign is leading in the polls. You see him here against the backdrop of the Ten Commandments. This is a frequent opportunity for him. He's depicted this way many times. And when I look at this, I wonder, will he be any more reasonable, rational, or cost-effective than Perry was? I'll quote from the Washington Post. Abbott likes to describe his job like this. I go into the office, I sue Barack Obama, and I go home. He sued the Obama administration over 24 times. He's one of several state attorney generals who sued over Obamacare, mandated contraception coverage, Environmental Protection Agency pollution standards, and the Voting Rights Act. He sued the EPA 17 times. He also argued in the 2005 Supreme Court case for the state's right to display the Ten Commandments on the Capitol grounds. This was allowed because the Supreme Court said people waited too long to complain. And make of all that what you will, but consider this also. Rick Perry resigned as governor so that he could run another presidential campaign, but Texas Republicans seem to prefer Ted Cruz, another science-denying ideologue wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross. Imagine our future in either instance. I remind you that Texas is one of 7 states where it is illegal for an atheist to hold public office. We're waiting for somebody to challenge that, but politicians would sooner admit they were gay than admit that they were atheist. It's in our state constitution that there's no religious test as long as you affirm belief in a supreme being. It should never be that any candidate's eligibility should require irrational beliefs in indefensible nonsense on insufficient evidence with unreasonable conviction. Especially not when you're electing a leader. Quite the opposite. In fact, these are the very criteria that I would think would disqualify someone from presiding over the rights and affairs of other people. Religion should have no influence over legislation ever. Faith is not a virtue and does not lead to good decisions. So religion has no place in politics and deserves no respect.